to share a little perspective on the last election. So I'm going to turn it over to my handsome partner in the labor movement and in my home, Richard Burton.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you. Let's see, I was at a conversation the other day, a union meeting, and one of the people there made mention of a discussion that had been had at their executive board. They had been talking about how few members were involved or participating in their union activities, and one of the executive board members actually thought that was a good thing. Said, well, that means that there's no problems. That means that everything's going great. So that's like we should take that lack of loud engagement to be a sign that we're doing just fine. And I was struck by that. It was interesting. This person I was talking to thought that was entirely the wrong read, and of course I thought so too. But it was an interesting sort of a slice of a different way of understanding things. This way of understanding engagement or participation and how important it is. I want to focus a little bit more on that with the portion I have to talk about. And I want to say a few kind of overarching preliminaries and then get into just one point about the 2016 presidential election that I hope we can use as a starting point for some discussion. Local political consultant here by the name of Lisa McLean, some of you may know her. I was at a meeting a while ago now, and she made a very profound point. She said that at the end of an election, there's always a whole lot of factors that ultimately explain why the campaign won or lost. It's rarely accurate to think that just one of them was the reason for why the election went one way or the other. A wise, kind of a careful analysis almost always results in there being a number of different factors that all played a role. So I want to just open up with that important point that it's usually the mark of wisdom to kind of be aware that there's a lot of different factors at stake in elections. And of course, the 2016 presidential election has been one that's been picked over a billion times, and there's a lot of ideological fights to this day as to what the key factors were, because different factions have something at stake as to which of those various factors are going to gain prominence. Certainly some big ones that have gotten a lot of attention are the notorious Russian meddling, good old-fashioned sexism, Comey's October 8th announcement, the media's kid glove treatment of Donald Trump, to cite just a few kind of prominent ones that have been tossed around. And I don't know why we should say that one of them is any more important than any of the others. They all seem to have played a prominent role in that. Before we launch into what I want to talk about, though, I want to, like I say, make a couple of points. I think it's important to analyze elections, and I think there's at least three reasons why people might want to analyze elections. One of them is so that you can be a loudmouth jerk in coffee shop conversations and annoy everyone else around you. A lot of people do it for that reason, I'll say. I've unfortunately been there, but I've tried to shy away from that. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is so that you can find some obscure feature about the election, copyright it, and then make money as an expert elitist political consultant for future elections. That's the second reason, and that's real, that also happened. But I would hope that the third and most important reason for why we want to analyze elections is so we can learn how to build a stronger movement for social justice. Yeah? I'm on board with that reason, and so I hope that can kind of guide our discussion about this. In the labor movement, when we try to organize a workforce, there's a standard assessment methodology that's used, and I want to suggest that we think about this methodology when it comes to the election. The methodology that's used in a workplace that's thinking about organizing into a union is that you go around and you talk to all these people, these prospective union members who haven't yet been able to form a union, and you talk to them. You go painstakingly one by one and you ask them, like, well, what do you think? Do you think you'd support a union? And you get a whole lot of different answers when you ask that question. Sometimes you get answers like, hell yeah, in fact, I'll have a meeting next week at my house where we can get 5 other people to sign up too. Okay, that's a number one. You're going to assess that person with the number one in your little clipboard that you're carefully carrying around as you're talking to people. Then you might also get an answer that goes something like, well, yeah, I support a union, but I don't really want to do a lot about it. But count me in, I'll sign up. Okay, that's a 2. They're on board, but they don't really want to do much else. Then you're going to get an answer like, I'm thinking about it. I might join. I need to think about it a little bit more. Can I get back to you next week? All right. Not foreclosing the possibility, but not for sure. That's a 3. And then you get, if you union pukes come to my face again, I'll kill you and I'll shoot your dog. Okay, that's a 4. That's a 4. You put that in your clipboard. You say, okay, that person's a 4. From now on, it's going to be a lot harder if I try to have another conversation with that person. Now, of course, numbers being what they are, and by the way, this is a little dig at standardized testing. People have a way of being more than numbers. People have a way of being more than numbers. So it's not a good idea to automatically think that whatever number you've assessed people at is where they're going to be at forever. But still, for the purposes of expedition, you want to be efficient with your time and resources, you want to now use those 1s to convert your 3s into 2s. That's what your organizing campaign is going to be about. You're going to train your 1s, you're going to have it at house meetings, you're going to give them literature, you're going to find those 3s and flip them into 2s, and maybe you can even flip some of those 2s into 1s. You're probably going to leave the 4s alone. You'll come back to them later. Hopefully there's so few of them that it won't make a difference in the final analysis. But that's generally how you want to do it. You've identified your 4s, and you kind of leave them out of the picture from here on out. Why is that relevant? Okay, here's what I want to suggest about the 2016 election. There's this standard story. I've already cited some other factors as to what happened in that election. But there's a standard mantra that has emerged on the screen, on the scene as a big one, and that is that white, working class, Rust Belt voters broke for Trump. Hillary lost because she didn't get that voter block. Okay, well, a lot depends on how you interpret those terms. What a working class person is, for example. If you define working class by income threshold, that claim turns out to be false. Lower income whites actually, to the extent that they voted at all, broke for Hillary rather than for Trump. Non-college white men did break solidly for Trump. In fact, in high numbers, non-college educated white men did break for Trump. But it's not the case that Trump called forth a massive number of those non-college educated white men. In fact, only 1% more of them turned out to vote in 2016 than turned out to vote for Romney in 2012. So it's not like there was a huge bunch of crackers that all came out because of Trump's messaging. It's just not how it happened. That's the story that we're thinking about, though. What is significant, that's not getting as much play, is the pretty significant decline in voter turnout from communities of color, especially black voters. 7% decline in voter turnout from 2012 to 2016. That's a significant number, especially when you look at the percentage of black voters who vote Democrat, right? In their worst year, 2004, when it was John Kerry, only 77% of black voters voted for Democrats. In 2008 and 2012, it was up in the high 80s and 90s that voted Democrat. I just want to highlight that fact. It's kind of interesting. I would say, and I would like to propose that you consider this, that these white, non-educated men who broke for Trump are the 4s in our assessment methodology. And these people who chose not to vote, communities of color who chose not to vote in 2016, there are 3s, right? There are 3s using this organizing methodology. It seems to me that even though the official story is that we're supposed to go after these 4s and woo them back using whatever methodology or reasoning or messaging we need to do to help them to feel more welcome part of the Democratic Party or the Progressive, whatever, that time would be better spent going after our 3s than our 4s. Just want to propose that that be something thought about. And I'd like to suggest an example where I think that's worked here in our own state, in the 30th Legislative District, where those of you who've been paying attention know that in the most recent election, for the first time in a number of cycles, Democrats won there. That 30th district, I think, has probably gone that way in large measure because of huge amounts of efforts to reach out to voters of color in that Algona, Pacific, Des Moines, Federal Way district. That's a significant voter block that has now been engaged and registered by a whole lot of different organizations over the last 5 years. I'd like to suggest that we do more of that, especially in other districts. And that might actually be a pathway for building more power and helping to enhance our social movement, social justice. All right, end of sermon, and now we'll turn it back over to Lynn. Thank you.